Hi, this is Pastor Steve with an encouraging word. The story comes out of World War II about an army unit fighting in Italy, and during one of the battles, one of their friends was killed in action. A few of the soldiers got together and said he deserves a fitting and proper burial. He was a good Christian man, good soldier, good friend. So they went to a nearby town and talked to the priest and said, could our friend be buried in the church cemetery? The priest asked, was he Catholic? And the soldiers shook their head and said, we don't think so, we're not sure. The priest said, well, he can't be buried in the church cemetery. Well, the soldiers started to walk away, and the priest said, wait, don't go yet. I tell you what, bury him outside the fence. Bury him on the other side of the fence of the church property, and I'll make sure to look after the grave. So the soldiers agreed to that and buried their friend, then went back to their unit. The war continued for another year or so until it finally ended. And as they got the orders to go home, they said, we're going to make one more trip to say goodbye to our friend. They went to the town and found the church, but when they looked outside the fence, they couldn't find the grave. They looked and looked, and it wasn't there. So they went to the church and knocked on the door, and the priest answered. They said, sir, we buried a friend here almost a year or so ago. We buried him outside the church property, outside the fence. You said you looked after the grave. The priest said, oh, well, yes, I remember that, and I did look after the grave. In fact, after a while, I realized that he belonged inside, so I moved the fence. The priest moved the fence so the man could be included. The priest realized that a child of God always belongs with God's people. There are a lot of things on our hearts and minds these days during a pandemic, not to mention the day-to-day affairs of life. But I hope you and I never lose sight of the fact that we're included, that we belong, that we are welcomed. To adapt the poem by Edward Markham, sin drew a circle that left me out, a rebel, a sinner, on the wrong side out. But God in love had the will to win. He sent Christ to move the fence to let me in. See, Christ came that we might know who we are and whose we are, that we belong to God. Let me read you a passage from 1 Peter chapter 2, just verses 9 and 10. Peter grasped this fact, and so he wanted to share it with the young church he wrote the letter to. But you are a chosen race, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, God's own people, in order that you may proclaim the mighty acts of him who called you out of darkness into his wonderful light. Once you were not a people, but now you are God's people. Once you had not received mercy, but now you have received mercy. See, that is who we are. We belong to God. We are included. We are part of God's own people. I think sometimes we forget that. We forget how special we are. We forget how much we're loved. We forget, too, the price God paid to open the door for us, to move that fence. For God so loved the world, he sent his Son. And sending his Son was not just to be born and live among us, but to die on that cross and rise on Easter Sunday for us. So as you go through your day, especially if it's a tough one, remember who you are and whose you are. Remember today, no matter what happens, that you belong to God. You're his child. You're one of his own people. And he never forgets his own. And his love for you goes on forever.